sponsors virtual booth in the virtual expo. Lauri, the stage is yours.
All right, here we go. Thank you very much, Stephanie, and thank you all for popping in here. I appreciate it. Um, I hope you're looking forward to learning how to see a little bit more about things that are going on around us in the world that we don't normally pay attention to. I'm gonna start out by sharing my screen here so you can see the presentation that I have, which you should be able to see here. And then I will get going. Just again, we're seeing the world around us, which could mean anything from, the beauty to garbage cans. Doesn't matter, right? It's all in how you frame it and how you see what's out there. So a little bit about myself. Well, maybe, there we go. I just wanted to let you know who I am. I am a fine art photographer. I tend towards architecture quite heavily. I sell work commercially. I work with art agencies to place work in like hospitals and business type places, situations where they, maybe hotels and that sort of thing. That's something that I'm working on this year pretty heavily. In the past, I've done art fairs for a little while. I kind of try things and then figure out if I like them or I don't, and then I move on. So I've done a little bit of everything, I feel like sometimes, but I am also, I lead photo tours. I have one coming up in Chicago in the end of May, how about April, the end of April. And I also do a little mentoring here and there when people ask. I like to help people. It's kind of what one of the other things that I like just do because I enjoy helping people in their own paths. I'll also write for photofocus.com, and I am the community manager for the PhotoFocus community, which is a photography community. We have weekly challenges, we have daily themes, and sometimes we do hangouts covering all kinds of things. So that's kind of a little bit about where I'm at right now, what I do. How did I get here? Well, I've had a camera in my hand for over, without giving away my age, 45 years. So I've always been a creative in some aspect. I took art classes, I took ballet classes most of my life. I taught ballet classes, and my family traveled across the US quite a bit. Every year we went somewhere different for vacation and we camped. So by the time I was 16, I'd been to 36 of the 50 states, which, at that time was kind of unheard of. People just didn't do that as much as it is now. We didn't travel. We traveled and we camped, so we drove everywhere. But what that did for me is it opened my eyes to other parts of the country, other landscapes, other cityscapes, other people from different parts of the country. And, it's a great experience as a kid to, get those experiences that you don't get if you don't leave the town that you grew up in. I'm so grateful to my parents for that. They gave me the travel bug, which I'm not always grateful for because I can't always go where I want when I want, but I think that really has a lot to do with how I view the world. And in turn, that has a lot to do with how I create my images. Then as I got older, I traveled overseas. It became even more of a eye-opening experience, right? You have different cultures and different colors and textures and the different age of things, going to Europe and other places where things are, thousands of years old. I mean, one of the first places I went overseas was Greece. Well, you don't get much older than that, so that all translates into my photography, and that's what I'm hoping that I can help you guys with here. It just opens your mind into seeing things in different ways. This is just an example, right? So I tend to get asked by photographers who are out with me when we're out shooting, or even by people who are viewing my work, like in a gallery or at an art fair, and they always ask me, how did I see that? Like, how did you notice that? we were in Chicago one time, and one of the guys was with me, was like, I was pointing my camera at a grate, like a grate in the street. And he's like, how do you even notice that? It's a grate in the street, you know? And I guess I'm just like uber aware of things. I see things that people don't notice, right? I don't tend to just walk by stuff without noticing it. I can sometimes catch things out of the corner of my eye, like bugs moving in the grass and things like that. It comes naturally to me. It's not always a good thing. Sometimes it's a bit of a curse because it pulls my attention away. When it shouldn't sometimes, like, ooh, look at that shadow. Ooh, look at that light. It's as photographers, I think that happens to a lot of us, right? You're like, oh my gosh, look at that, like that garbage can in the first slide. I mean, it's a garbage can in the street, but the shadow was amazing. So it's part of who I am, right? I have a natural curiosity about life, and about the world around me. I also tend to joke that in my head, I'm 12. Being childlike also helps you see the world differently. You view what you're looking at in a different way than someone who's 50, right? If I'm 5 or if I'm 12, I see it in a different way, right? I'm framing something when I'm 50 or however old, with my life experiences, but when I'm 5, I have no life experiences. So I'm open to seeing things that it's might not be noticeable for somebody else. It's a good mindset sometimes when you're out to think that way. I believe this can be taught. I believe you can practice this on your own until it becomes kind of second nature. I think as photographers, we're kind of already on that path to seeing things differently and trying to notice things differently. None of us want to be taking the same photo as the guy next to us, right? We all want to tell our own stories. We all want to have our unique point of view. And I think that, again, as photographers, we're heading that way already because we've picked up the camera. But some of us need a little push, to go a little bit further. So I'm here to just nudge you a little bit with that. I like to make people stop and think. So when I take an image, I want to know that somebody's going to go, what is that? Or why is that? Or what am I looking at? And it's not always easy to do that. And personally, I work hard. I work at it, right? I deliberately think about this when I'm out with my camera. For example, this is another example, right? This is a friend of mine and I were out in a forest preserve, and there was a little creek and a little bridge over it, and the view looking far was pretty. It was fall, and there was a creek and trees and a lovely landscape. But I'm like, okay, it's all brown right now, and what else is there? And I tend to look down a lot. I also look up a lot, but when I look down, I see these really cool lines from the shadows of the trees in the water. The leaves under the water always look kind of cool, like they're different, because the water is like a filter over the top of them. Then I saw these little pieces poking up and making like above the surface tension. They made little surface tension spots. And then I was like, well, those kind of look like eyes, and that kind of looks like Groot laying in there, so it just, like, my imagination just kept going. In particular, this image, when I took it into Lightroom, I was like, this needs a little help. I don't tend to do a ton of editing, post-processing, and depending on my mood and if I feel like being artsy or not. But in this case, I enhanced the eyes a little bit because they needed to pop just a little bit. They needed to be a little bit bluer. But it's just an example to show you that if I was not paying attention, like if I'm just looking at the landscape, right, in the trees and the the way the creek goes down into the woods, I never would have noticed this. Same for these, right? These are leaves floating in water. This is something and now I'm super aware of this when I'm out by any kind of water. I was at a Japanese gardens, and there's like a deck kind of thing out over part of a pond, and there's a willow tree hanging. Again, it's a beautiful scene. There's a really nice, like, colored umbrella on the other side. It's reflecting in the water. And I took that shot, right? I took the wide shot too. But I'm I tend to look for details. And again, I want to find something different and unique. So I look down straight in the water, and there's these leaves like floating, and the water has arranged them like magically into these compositions. So I call this nature's compositions, this series, because I have several of these now, and I've taken a few of them in other places. The water, the leaves falling in the water, this is how they ended up with the currents of the water and how they arrange themselves. To me, they just look like still life leaves, right? And again, this was something I decided to do more artistically because I felt like they were still life. I felt like they would look kind of cool on canvas. So I took them in a Topaz Texture Effects and put a canvas texture on them. But it's stopping and looking beyond or looking past what I initially saw when I got there. Excuse me, right? It's a beautiful place. I go to the Japanese gardens all the time. And I'm always looking for different things every time I go. But now every time I go, I also look down into the water to see if I can find any of these little compositions that are automatically happening. So it's just another example to show you that you can always find other things besides what you initially look for, what you're initially seeing when you come to a place. This is a great example, and this is really hard. This image, I stood. What initially caught my eye is the girl standing there, right? Her front of her was lit up, and that's what caught my eye. And then the very long shadow that she made was like, I was like, wow, that's really cool. I wasn't even paying attention really to anything else going on in the shot. And I took the shot, right? Because that's what we do. So later on, when I edited as a black and white like this, and I was in a mentorship program, and we were doing, sharing images and doing critiques and that sort of thing. And when I pulled this up, somebody was like, wow, that is so interesting. And I'm like, well, it's not that interesting, but they're like, the shadows are coming from two different directions. And I'm like, oh, now I see that. So you can see up here, the shadow here where she's at, right? The long shadow, but then there's these shadows come in the opposite direction from these people because of the light reflecting off the building. So now, because of this image, I'm even more aware of those types of things, right? So even after you bring your images in and look at them on your laptop or your computer or whatever, study them and see stuff like that you don't notice right away. I know a lot of times we'll take photos and then we'll come back and we'll upload them onto a much bigger screen, and then we'll be like, what? I didn't see that in the frame, right? So you can push yourself to start seeing those things when you're shooting, right? If you just keep practicing seeing them, right? Study your images, study someone else's images. But it helps you start seeing more when you're out, and then you're more deliberate about what you're looking for and how you're seeing it. So, in this case, like the bean has been shot, I don't know, billions of times, right? You've seen, I don't know how many photos of the bean. Now, when I go there, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, I don't even take my camera out for a good 10, 15 minutes, if not more. And then I'll start shooting. But there's too much going on, right? And if you've never been to the bean, yeah, by all means, get a photo of the bean, right? But then hang out and check out what's going on and see what else you can find. And this is just a lesson in being patient. It's a lesson in waiting for your shot. Watch the people, right? People do anything. People do all kinds of crazy stuff around the bean. So you can find all sorts of fun things to shoot, around there. And just watch people, pay attention to the light. This image, pay attention to the light was a big lesson here for me. I was paying attention to the light, but only the first one that I saw, right? There's more. So there could always be more, right? Oops. This is another example of looking for something different. This is the Chicago River. Obviously it's winter, that's ice. I was out with, I don't know, 6 or 8 other photographers. doing a photo walk thing. Nobody else took images like this that I'm aware of in that period of time. Again, everybody's looking at the skyline. This is along the Riverwalk, so there's cool buildings on both sides. There's reflections in the water. There's awesome bridges, and I had on my zoom lens, which I tend to use probably 90% of the time when I'm out photographing, because it changes my point of view, changes the perspective of what I'm seeing. So I'm like, everybody's taking the river, the bridges, the buildings, and I'm like, what else can I find, right? And I love ice. I'm a winter person. I love architecture, and the ice and the water and the reflections just blew me away. I was like, oh my God, I've hit the jackpot. And I have a series of these from that day and from other days when I've been back. So it's again, purposely looking for something that nobody else is looking at or finding or seeing. So that's just another example of that. There's always more to the story, right? There's a huge, huge story on the Chicago Riverwalk. It's all kinds of activities, all kinds of motion, just there's a lot going on, a lot to see. But if you step back and go, okay, let's take just little like pieces of it, this is too much for me. Like, right, my brain gets overloaded. So I just have to go, okay, let's just see a little bit at a time. I just real quick, somebody asked about shooting with a tripod in places like the Bean. I would look it up. They don't allow them usually, and you'll usually get a security person telling you can't use it there. It's a security and safety issue. Monopods, I don't know if they will or not. It depends on who's working on what day, basically. But there's places you can set your camera down. I mean, there's, get creative. Just, set it on the ground, set it on a fence, that kind of thing. You can always make it work. And then somebody just asked me about what gear I use. I have a Canon 6D, and these shots that I've showed you so far have been with an old Canon 70 to 30 millimeter. I also have a 17 to 40 millimeter. And since the 70 to 300, I've upgraded to a Tamron 100 to 400, which I've used a lot. So that's my extent of gear talk. I'm not a gear person, so you can ask. I might be able to answer you. I don't know. If I can't, I'll let you know. So it's just another example of paying attention, looking at what's around you, not just always looking at the larger picture, Again, this is a very small piece of a very, very large image. I saw it and immediately noticed the colors. It's ice, which I have an affinity to. It's layers. It's just something that's kind of abstract, but not really. It isn't abstract to me because I was there. Other people have thought that it looked like clouds on a smaller screen. Once you open it larger, you kind of get an idea what it is. But it's a scene from an iceberg. And, like I said, there's obviously a much, much larger story here. But it's finding compositions within compositions, right? So, take a big shot and then see what else is in there, right? Like slow down, step back, just kind of, check out what else you see, right? Somebody else said they see mountains in there, which I see also now. I can see that being something that you could see. That is the larger scene. You have to take that shot. I mean, that's like a once in a lifetime shot. Thank God for me. I'm so fortunate that I was able to do this. So that's the big picture. Like, that's the whole story. It's not even the whole story, really. It's like taking a picture of the Grand Canyon, right? You can't possibly take that picture because you can't. You can take a pano to infinity and you're still not going to get the whole thing. So, when you're traveling, it's hard to slow down because you're like, ooh, look at that. Ooh, look at that. Everything's new. You want to see everything, you want to capture it all. And you also want to get those images that people are going to be like, oh, wow. Or, that one's going to hang on my wall. This image is hanging on my wall because it was an incredible day to remember. But even if you're just, hiking nearby, going places that I go to the Bean, I go to the city quite often, right? But it's always different. But you still want to be able to bring back stories of your trip, or of your day or whatever you did, right? So it's like, you still want to take photos of all parts of the story. It's like going to a restaurant and taking a photo of the restaurant, but not taking a picture of your food, and nowadays it's opposite, right? Everybody takes a picture of their food, but nobody takes a picture of the restaurant. So you're as a photographer, you're telling the story of whatever it is that you're doing or where you were. So like I can go back through actual photo albums from when I first started taking photos of family trips. And I did this kind of naturally, I guess. I mean, not deliberately. At that time, it wasn't deliberate, but I still took the photos that were part of where we were. Plus, I have pictures of, a landscape or parts of the scene, So I don't know, again, if it kind of comes naturally to me. I've always done that. But if you're creating art as opposed to documenting your life, make that part of your story as well, right? I create art. So the image before I would consider like a fine art piece, or the ice on the river is more of a fine art piece. But it's still part of my photography story, right? I don't have to create the larger landscapes, the big, that's not what I do. But if one presents itself to me like this one, I'm taking it. Somebody just asked me my opinion on sky replacement. You guys don't know me, most of you that are in here. So I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm not a big photo manipulator, as in like, I use Photoshop to remove a little thing here and there that might be distracting from the main subject of my image, but I do not do sky replacement. I mean, this is what this looked like on that day. You would have a hard time. It would take hours to make that reflection work in an image like this anyway. I'm not that patient. So again, it's art though. Photography is art. So if your art includes changing the sky, that's what you do. That's fine. You can't, it's all, it's all opinion. It's all what you like. And if you're doing it for yourself, then that's what you do. I'm not a fan. People do it really well and I don't know the difference. And I'm always like, oh my gosh, you fooled me. So honor your creative spirit. Basically, that's in my notes. That works perfectly with that question, because my creative spirit doesn't do sky replacements. So here's another opportunity to tell parts of the story. This is on that same trip that I was up in Svalbard in the Arctic. And this is looking straight down at the hull of the ship going through ice. So it's a little abstractish if you don't know what it is. Yeah, I mean, you can tell that it's ice, but then that one chunk there, this thing, like kind of looks like it's a face, kind of like a ice mask laying there. But it told a different part of the story, right? You can see the ice and see the ship like pushing through, how thick it was. And then, here's the larger view, right? This is where what we looked at every day, not every day, but this day it was foggy and very icy. And the water was very icy. So it's just another part of the story of my Arctic trip that I can tell and show people if people want to see. People used to do slideshows back in the day when they come home from vacation. Now we just post it all on social media. So, but for my own purposes, right? I want to remember what it was like to stand there and shoot this photo. I want to remember what it was to look right down at the ice coming next to the ship. And this is just one more unique take on that. I was up on, I don't know, 3rd or 4th level and looking straight down. And again, this is a particular perspective that people don't always think about right off the top of their heads, right? These, like looking up and looking straight down, are kind of like my go-tos right away. And then I look around, right? Like, oh, what can I find down there? I got lucky with the person in the blue coat being right in the right spot there. Um, but again, it's all part of the story. It's all part of the trip, right? It just um, it all brings it all together, right? It helps you remember, where you were, what you saw, other people, the food you ate, the scenes, the sights and smells that you were, were there. And it all brings it back when you start looking through images that are a little more detailed than just, here's a picture of the Statue of Liberty. It helps bring those memories back. And photography is a lot of that. Sorry. I touch on this very quickly. Because we all have to learn things first, right? You have to learn your camera. You need to learn how to do things to make it do what you want. You need to learn how to change your settings so that you get the image that you want. That's all part of this. It's also good to learn the rules, right? Composition is huge. In my opinion, composition makes or breaks an image. It could be a really pretty shot, but if it's just off a little bit for some reason, if the horizon is crooked, it doesn't help the image at all, right? So learn the rules of composition, the saying, right? Learn the rules so you can break them. They're not hard and fast rules, they're guidelines, but they help your images look a little bit better. Leading lines help your viewer come to where you want them to look. The rule of thirds, rule of space, leading lines, framing, color theory, I think often gets left out of the rules of composition. But all these things will help you create better images. If you learn them and you kind of think about them when you're out with your camera, then you start seeing the compositions, right? Instead of thinking, instead of moving like 2 steps to the left or right, or tilting your camera up or down just a little bit, sometimes is all it takes. Instead of doing that, I feel like people just take the photo and then they're like, well, we'll just crop it later. Well, that's fine if you want. I don't like to spend a lot of time in my post-processing software. It's not what I like to do. So I'd rather take the time and slow down to do it how I want it to begin with. And again, I just bring up the rules because they're important to learn. Same with learning your camera and how it works and what f-stop is, what ISO is, and what shutter speed is. It's important to know those things. It's important to know where stuff is on your camera so that you can take a photo on the fly if you need to, and you don't miss the shot because you don't know how to, like you're sitting there fumbling with your camera. I still do that because I still don't automatically know everything on my camera, but it helps though. Every little thing like this helps you get better. And then you play around, right? And you're like, okay, that's fine. But what if I do that? What if I break that rule? What happens? Or what does it look like if I do this instead of it being just like that? It's all part of the process. So this is my beware your surroundings, right? So many of us go through day-to-day life and we're not aware of what's going on around us. Every day for however many years, I drove back and forth to a job, same exact route most of the time. How many times did I pass like a really cool piece of architecture, a building that I'd never really paid attention to, and or different times of day, like the light on that building is different. We just go about our lives and we don't pay attention to what goes on around us, and have your camera with you all the time as well. Most of us do. We have phones, which is fine because in my mind, you're still practicing seeing, right? You have your camera and something caught your eye, you're going to shoot it with your phone. It's a learning process, right? You're getting this in your head, right? Like, oh, okay. So next time you come upon something, you have your camera, you're like, oh, right, I did that with my phone. Very similar kind of idea. So in this collage, I have things that I see or have seen every day, or not every day, or things that I feel like people probably didn't notice. This frog was frozen on this fence. This is a spot I go to all the time. People probably walked right by him. They didn't notice him. Poor guy, right? Um, is it an interesting shot? I don't know. It's bizarre, but I took it for a reason, because I knew that people probably didn't really ever see him sitting there. Probably somebody put him there because I'm pretty sure he wasn't doing yoga and just landed that way or whatever. But this one, let me see if I do this the right way. Yeah, this is a tile in my bathroom. I see this every day, and it's a seahorse. So like I see a seahorse in my shower every day. This shot is ice cube that was not fully formed, and I had to take it out of the freezer and take a photo because it was just different. I don't know. It reminded me of something. I don't know what, but I had to do it. This one I'm pretty sure most of you are aware of. There used to be a commercial, a laundry detergent commercial with the fighting octopus guy. This guy's not anymore. I don't have him because we got a new floor. He was in my old floor. So I have this little ghosty guy in the floor. And then this piece of ice in a creek reminded me of the Green Goblin, or one of the villains from one of the superhero movies, whatever. But again, these things are like that you probably don't really notice in everyday life, right? You just don't pay attention to these things. When you have your camera, you should be noticing things more than you would if you didn't, right? And somebody mentioned that there used to be a blog called Faces in Places. And this is an activity or a lesson. When I do a mentorship, I have people go out for a week and only, look for faces in things. And it's crazy because they're everywhere. And once you start seeing those faces, you can't stop. And it's almost obsessive, right? It's kind of scary, but yeah, they're everywhere. So it gets you though to start looking further, right? Looking past what you initially see. When you're looking for faces, or if you start looking for a color, looking for a shape. So one day go out and shoot only triangles or only red things or anything like that. And then you start seeing them all the time. It's like when you buy a new car, right? You've never seen maybe 2 of those cars on the road. Then after you buy your car, you see 15 of them every day because you're more aware that they're out there. So it's like seeing things in the clouds. Once you start doing that, it becomes second nature. You can't help it. It's like I said, I can't help it seeing things. Take time to practice that every day. It's kind of fun. This is just an example. I think this might be on Michigan Avenue or State Michigan Avenue. I can't remember. A fairly busy street, Chicago. It's between 2 buildings, and Louis Sullivan is the architecture, and his work is detailed like this, crazy, amazing, beautiful. People walk by this. I'm pretty sure millions of people have walked by this and never even noticed it, right? My eye is drawn to the architecture. So I'm like, and I seek out Louis Sullivan architecture anyway. So I knew this building was here and that kind of thing. But, just knowing that people walk by this sidewalk all the time and don't stop to see it, we don't stop to see is the problem. This was what I was talking about before with the bean. Slow down, right? Stop doing everything like, full on. Take time to be in the moment and take in your surroundings. Go to a place where you always go, right? A park, the bean, downtown. I go out and shoot in my backyard all the time. You'd think I would know it or see stuff that is the same stuff all the time, but it all changes. It's a different day, it's different light, different time of day, different weather. It's cold, it's wet, it's snow, it's rain. It's always changing, always. But go to these places and sit down and just observe, right? So like I said, when I go to the bean, I don't even take my camera out. I wander around. I sit in one place for a while and just watch. And then I start thinking, like, how can I do this in a way that nobody's ever shot it before? Something like the bean, that's very difficult because it's probably the most photographed thing in Chicago. So here's a couple examples, right? I picked a leaf up, I put it on handrail, and I just left the bean blurred. Same with the flowers, right? It's still the bean. You still know what it is. Pretty sure mostly you know what it is, you know. The image in the middle is another one. This is a park, Lincoln Park, and the reflection of the city in the pond is another image that tons of people photograph. And we got there that day to do the same thing. I think somebody from out of town was in town, so we go to all the little iconic spots, you know. And I looked down at the railing and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. There's an outline. Somebody drew an outline of the city there. So I included that in my image. Now I have an image of the reflection of the city in the pond at Lincoln Park in a different way than probably anybody else does. You know, again, I push myself to see more and try that. So that's, again, you just keep practicing that, keep slowing down and being way more deliberate about what you're doing. Here's another one that's a little bit different. You know, I'm sure there's more of these out there, but again, you know, take yourself to a spot, pretend you've never been there before. What would you notice if it was the first time you were there? What would a 5-year-old see? How would a 5-year-old see the same scene, right? What would be the first thing they notice? A 5-year-old might notice the really cool, like, things on the fence. They might not even see the bean. I mean, they will, but you know, think about how somebody else might see the same scene, you know, or what you were feeling. How did you feel when you walked up to the scene? What did it make you feel? How can I capture what I felt in my image, right? You want your viewer to feel that. You want them to you want to bring the experience to them through your photo, right? So it's deliberate. You have to slow down and think about these things. You know, you might find other angles to shoot or other areas, you know, things to use as backgrounds. Like, just, again, it's really deliberate, and you have to work at it, right? Anybody can walk up and take an image of the bean, but how do you make it different? How do you make it your own? This is another, right? I was in a park. This is, you know, I was probably taking pictures of leaves, fall leaves, you know, foliage, whatever, that kind of thing. And which is fine. And it's, that kind of stuff is okay for me. And it depends on if there's water around and what other interesting things are around. But when I was walking back to my car, I stopped in my tracks because of this reflection in this water fountain. Again, how many people would actually notice that without being aware? You know, I'm walking back to my car. Why would I be looking at a water fountain that's not even on, right? You can't even use it. So why would I pay attention to it? Well, that's why, because there's a really unique image there. So it's just something you start, again, once you start looking for things and seeing things with more detail, seeing things with different questions in your mind, you'll start noticing more things. You'll start finding more images to your, you know, to add to your wide view or add to your macro. I mean, yes, macro is macro, and that's a little bit different. Still stories to tell in there. It's just done in a different way. So that brings me to perspective. A lot of my stuff, a lot of my work is based on perspectives, which is how you view something just as much as the way you view something, right? So I believe that my life perspective is visible in my photography, right? I have a little bit of different take on the world. I don't always abide by or think like, you know, the quote unquote general public or whatever. Like, I mean, just for example, right, with that, I don't follow the norm. That's not the right way to put that, but like, if everybody's wearing Converse tennis shoes, I'm not wearing them, basically, is how I operate. Like, I don't want to do the same thing as everybody else. I never have. That applies to my photography. But perspectives, this is one of the easiest things to do when you're out taking photos, is to change your perspective, change your point of view. You know, you use your perspectives, your own life, right? Like I just said, this is all included in how we photograph, right? And what you present to the public in your photographs is part of who you are, right? Your photographs are an extension of you. An artist paints, the painting is an extension of them. There's little things that you can do to change the image or what you see in your frame to be a little bit better. This exercise, stand in one place, take 10 shots. Do not move your feet, right? This forces you to find things. One of my biggest pet peeves is people who say, there's nothing to photograph, but there's always something to photograph, right? Always. I can go in my garage and take pictures. I can go in my basement. I've lived in this house more than 10 years. I can still find things here to photograph, and I can find ways to make them interesting. I have to try though, right? Like, I'm like, well, it's not sunrise and sunset, so forget it. There's more out there, way more. Nothing against sunrise and sunset shooters. I just I've done my share, and I prefer something else. But these are exercises, right? The more you limit yourself, the more you find yourself finding your thing, like finding what speaks to you when you're out, and what jumps out at you. And the other thing with these things, these are exercises, right? You do not have to create masterpieces every time you're out with your camera. It's called practice, right? Musicians practice. They don't perform without practicing. Artists practice, people who draw practice. For some reason, as photographers, I feel like we're like, oh, you have to take a good photo every time. Well, that's not even realistic. It just isn't. How many of the images that you post on social media are your best shot? How many are your worst? You're not posting those, but you have to practice these things. Stop, take 10 minutes, stop and stand in one place. It's an exercise to help you start pushing yourself to see more of what's around you and see what the possibilities are. Let's see. This is an example, right? This was a word that I had in a scavenger hunt that I belonged to. The word was hungover. And I kept thinking, how do I do it different than everybody else, right? Everybody's going to do people, not feeling so good the day after a party, that kind of thing. And there were other versions. I laid on my bathroom floor, took some tights and stockings and hung on the curtain rod. And that was my different perspective, my different take on hungover. Get creative, use your brain, use your imagination, and just push yourself to do and see further than what you immediately think of. This is an easy one. It isn't always easy because you're afraid you're going to drop your camera down 67 stories, but I had my strap around my neck, but again, change the perspective. A lot of people, and I shot out from the balcony of the building we were on, but looking straight down, way more interesting, way more scary, way more like the image is like you're there, So those are just examples. This is the other part of it all. Think goes into all of this, right? I think too much. Sometimes it stops me from taking photos for periods of time because I let it stop me. I think way too much about why I'm doing this, but you have to, right? You have to start, do you want to make a few extra dollars from your photography? Why are you taking this photo? Are you going to hang it on your wall? Are you going to post it on social media? Are you going to, sell it in some way? Are you just creating memories? Are you putting it in a photo book? Are you creating an album? All these things go into why you shoot an image, right? What makes you stop and take that photo beyond what you see? Is this part of your career? Do you have to take this shot? Whatever the reason is, changes how you shoot. If I have to take a photo for somebody that's paying me, I try not to. We all probably try not to, but it's hard to not have that in your head, right? Because then there's a little bit of pressure you have to create, right? Which I'm going to talk about in a second. So you just ask yourself the hard questions, whatever it is. These things can change from day to day also. I just want to check my time. The reason I go out today might be because I just need to get out of the house. I don't care about creating an image, right? I'm going to take my camera or my phone. This is a phone shot, because I just need to get out. It's therapy for me, right? So the reason why I take the image is different, which results in different images. I don't feel the pressure to create something that I have to sell, or that I'm hanging on the wall, or that I'm putting in an album. I can just create just because, or I can just shoot just because, right? Just to get my mind off of whatever else is going on. This day was different, right? This is a day where I wanted to go out and create a specific shot. I knew the weather was right. I knew where I was going, and that resulted in this. It was way more deliberate. I knew the why behind it. I knew it wasn't just getting out and shooting, right? It was, I wanted to go to this specific place at this specific time because of this, and this is what I wanted. So it's a different mindset when you know, every day is different. My emotion changes from every minute to the next some days, so my images would reflect that. It all goes into how we see at that particular time, and what we see and why we're seeing it, like what catches our eye at that particular moment. Why is a huge question, which I hate, because it totally makes me not want to do this sometimes. But you think about it, why you're shooting. Like I said, am I just somewhere there's a happy medium between taking a bunch of shots or being deliberate, taking one shot. It's practice, right? We all need to practice whatever it is you're learning, and whatever it is you're trying to be better at or want to be better at. Photography is no different. I think because it's easier, because of digital, we feel like it's not different, that we don't need to try as hard sometimes because it's easier, quote unquote, because it's digital, and you could just, press this, put it on auto, put it here, and it's all good. And I shoot on auto too. Not always. It depends on what I'm doing. There's a time and a place, I believe, for that too. But the big thing is slow down and pay attention. Be more aware of your surroundings. Be more aware of your why. Like, what is driving you to do this? Why are you going to? Where, you're going. Somebody just asked if I ask these questions while I'm shooting or afterwards, and the answer is yes. All the time, these questions are going through my head, because it feeds the creativity. It feeds the reason that I'm doing it. It feeds the result, right? The answer today might be this, and the answer tomorrow might be that. And the image that I take isn't going to be the same because of what's going on in my head. So seeing and what you see and how you see goes far beyond just the visible, right? It's all part of in here and in here, right? It's part of in your heart. Part of all this is creative blocks. We all deal with this. I just wanted to share this as a little bit of a way to get out of them. Hopefully, we struggle. We all do. I know we all do. Bad weather, stuck in the house, like that was a big thing the last couple of years. Nowhere to go. The light's not good, which is another excuse because there's no bad light. Somebody said that. I don't know who, but I totally agree. One of the things you can do is just do it, right? Just pick up your camera, pick up your phone, right? If I don't feel like shooting with my camera, I take my phone and go, okay, I'm just going to go, and go play, because that unlocks it, right? It helps you get past whatever it is that's holding you from taking your phone out and doing that, right? Cameron says, set yourself a goal. Like I said earlier, go out one day and shoot only triangles or the color red, or, shoot with one lens. Those help you get out of creative blocks too, limiting yourself. Like, use only one lens. Don't even take your bag. Take your camera and your lens. Do not take anything else with you. Then you're not tempted. Will you miss an amazing shot? You might. I don't know. And part of seeing too is, this is a shot in Antarctica actually, but it was the same kind of scene as the very large scene. This is clouds reflected on water, right? Because I already shot all the mountains. This day was incredibly crazy with the amount of whales we saw. I was like joking, but like, how many whale tail shots can you have? And what do you do with all of them eventually? again, very fortunate to be able to have those experiences. But then I started pointing my camera at the water because it was really interesting. Shoot something you wouldn't normally shoot, photograph something you don't normally photograph. That'll push you out of a creative, if you're stuck too. Something else I do a lot of, I put my camera on the ground, on surfaces. I put my camera on this marble column looking straight up. Again, not something somebody would normally think about, but look at the reflections in that marble. It makes it a very unique, interesting image. It adds more texture and depth to the image. But it shows that if you just push yourself a little bit further, go just past what you would normally do, right? Ask what if I do that? Or what happens if this, just what if is a really good question. Nicholas asked if I had hard and fast rules for pre-planning, and I do not. It depends on what I am going to do. A lot of times I just go out wandering, so I don't have pre set up things that I do. I don't check the time of the sunrise and sunset. I don't look for where the sun's coming from and the light's coming from. I mean, yes, if I'm downtown and it's midday, I know that I'm going to get some harsh shadows, but I don't care. Like, I know that I can find ways to photograph that anyway. So then post-processing is also part of how we see, right? I might not, this isn't the image that I saw, right? In my head though, when I brought this when I downloaded on the computer, I kept looking at it and I'm like, there's more to this image than what is just there. It needed something else. It needed something to help me. It needed something to help me tell the story of the grit and the character and the texture and colors of this place. And I did that with some textures in Topaz Texture Effects. Yes, it was a Topaz Texture Effects. And again, I don't do a lot of this, but sometimes an image says, I need a little help, and I need to be a little more artsy. Another thing that I do every now and then is I just flip an image, flip it vertical, flip it upside down, see what happens. Obviously with reflections like this, I call this winter Rorschach. I hung this on a canvas in art shows, and people are, it's fun to watch reactions. People stand there and turn their heads sideways and like, why did you hang this wrong? Well, I didn't hang it wrong. Why do you think that's wrong, right? So it's changing your view, changing somebody else's view, getting somebody else to see something differently. I work at that. That's my underlying, I like to make people think about it. Someone wants to know when I decide to bring a tripod with you. Well, if you know me, you know that I don't. Very rarely. I don't, like a couple weeks ago, I went out, I put my tripod in my car and I put my platypod in my camera bag. It's as far as they got. So would I have more keeper shots if I did use a tripod? Yes, I will admit that. I find tripods limiting. I can't always do what I want. I can't always just go tweak a little bit this way or move this way or move that way. Not easily, and I can't be bothered. So that's my tripod theories. So this quote I like, it's just seeing, right? It's not about the photography, it's about seeing. Excuse me. So hopefully all these things are things that you can take from here and use, right? Practice, right? It's just practice, and it's digital, which is awesome because then it doesn't cost us anything. I learned on film, so I wrote down everything I shot, and I made sure that I wasn't wasting my shot. So I just want to let you guys know, I appreciate you guys being here. This was awesome. I'm a little new to this sort of thing, so it's been fun. I appreciate the questions and comments, and I want to thank you all for being here. I am giving a photo tour in Chicago this spring, and I'd like to offer you $100 off. You can see that there. I'm always open for questions. I'm always around social media. You guys have questions for me, DM me, email me. I'm happy to help. Like I said, that's one of my things too, is helping people. So I enjoy being able to help someone else see, and I enjoy being able to help someone move a little bit further down their own path. So that's it. And that would be it for me today. Thank you again. I appreciate it. And I can stop my share there if you guys want to.
Thank you, Lauri.
Thanks so much.
Reminder to all attendees that once you leave, an end of session survey will pop up. Please fill that out for us. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the conference.